the Maureen Pound Show, where we get extraordinary insights from cool business people. Today, we're going to be speaking with Amy Gale from Amy Gale Studios, and she's going to be sharing about how to use activations in urban spaces, businesses, and homes to create memorable experiences. So, without further ado, let's welcome Amy.
Hi.
Hi, Amy. I'd like to first jump in and ask you to share with the audience today something quirky or different or unusual about you.
Okay. So I used to be an acrobat dancer, and I toured the world for 10 years from the age of 21 to 31. Yeah, that's the quirky thing about me. So yeah, I used to do a specialist apparatus. I used to climb up to the top of this crazy 5.5 meter pole that was bendy and strap myself into the top of it and sway around the world.
Wow. How on earth does one, get into that?
Well, I started, me and my sister basically loved dancing and acrobatics when we were young, and we got given this extraordinary opportunity with a trad clown, a mime, and an acrobat dancer, and they all had professional careers, and they kind of just took my sister and I under their wing, and we got all this incredible performance opportunity and professional experience from a really young age. So yeah.
Wow.
And then of course, that just led to corporate event gigs, like perfume launches, alcohol launches, club gigs. And then by the time I was 21, I actually auditioned for this troupe and got in, and it sort of changed my life, my professional career forever.
Excellent.
Yeah, I had this incredible experience of understanding production and going to different places all over the world and different audiences, and we're going to talk about activation, but essentially it was activating place. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what is activation?
Activation is anything from an event, a festival, art, activity, like an arts trail, anything that sort of has a community engagement that is usually visual, but not necessarily. So it's like it's an experience in a space, essentially. That's what an activation is.
Right. And so can you give me an example, like an example of what people might have seen an activation in a space and not even known that was what it was?
Yeah, okay. So in the context of like a city activation, it could be down at a pier or like a public space, like Fed Square, for instance, in Melbourne. They would have pretty much an activation most weekends, I'd imagine. So they might have a special day, like International Women's Day, and do some kind of just some kind of activity or a celebration or an event that marks that special day, or just activates the space. So yeah, it can be anything from, it really can be sort of anything that's engaging in a space.
Yeah. So for instance, in Moomba is coming up here in Melbourne, and so they potentially might have roaming performers or
so Moomba's a festival, but as part of that festival, they would have little satellite things that they would call activations to expand on the concept of Moomba having like this central feature. So I guess in a way, what I'm sort of talking about is temporary activation. So it doesn't stay. it's temporary, so it just enters the space for maybe, you know, a week at the most, or even a day or a few hours, and then it leaves. But it essentially is like, we call it activating space because it's bringing a highlight to an area, and it links with some kind of reason to do it.
Yeah, awesome. And I know that you've done some amazing ones in the last few years that really create these memorable experiences. You know, you go into a space and create something amazing. Can you share a little bit about what you've done?
Yeah. Okay. So I've done a lot in events, and the ones that I've done recently are, I've gone to Stradbroke Island and helped facilitate and run and create an arts trail there, that we worked with 24 different galleries and artists so that people could go over for each weekend for 3 weeks and roam around the island and visit all these private galleries and artists. And as part of that, there was activations like we had an artist talk that walked along the foreshore and did this art on the beach, and then went back and was cooked. We had a meal that was cooked by a local chef with all this incredible local seafood that was caught off the island, and then a workshop with a weaver. So that was a recent one. There's also a lot of other events and things that I've done that are just amazing. But yeah, I've done a lot of creative services for events, and in a way, these products that I've made are activations within themselves. So people will have an event and they can't necessarily do something with the space. So I have these products that they can essentially buy, and it will give a decorative element and an interactive element to their event. So these products that I have are called movable feasts and the orbs, and they are essentially performance based, but they do so much more for an event, and they can be used in public space. So for instance, 2 weekends ago, I did Chinese New Year in the Valley in Brisbane, and we had the orbs and movable feasts all in Asian themed, which creates this beautiful decorative experience. So it's amazing photo opportunity and a media wall, and it's roving, and it celebrates Chinese New Year.
Awesome. Sounds amazing. And so that's an example of, say, you know, a space within an outdoor setting where it would be like a festival. Can you use, you know, activations at, say, parties or weddings? When can you use
activations is part of what I do, but essentially, I mean, I'm interested in space and the human experience. So that could be, so like the background for me for this is that I've sort of created my job. And I think the world is kind of only just caught up to being ready for where we're at in 3D design. So we're all highly educated visually now. Like everyone is inundated with brands and the visual information that comes to us. And you might not know, like the novice might not know exactly why they like something, but they do know when they like it now. And I personally find the 3-dimensional spaces quite predictable and boring. And so I have done a lot of work in interior design, decorative design, performance, events, and I have this sort of breadth of experience that essentially is quite specialist in understanding space and how to deal with space. So I guess that lends itself to activations and events. But ultimately, really, what I'm interested in is the three-dimensional visual and sensory experience for people to make it more human, imaginative, interesting, and interactive. So that can be applied to urban spaces. It can be applied to a home. It can be applied to a backyard space, or it can be applied to a business. So an event business, a business having an event or a special celebration. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. So it sounds like it's much broader than just the activation itself. It's about the whole event and experience.
Yeah, it's essentially design, but it's definitely bordering on arts as well, or it uses both. It uses both arts and design to think about the audience and the audience experience. And I guess that it can, in an event environment, so for a brand, like that's really important for a brand now. So when they hire me, they get a three-dimensional event experience, but then I guess they get a lot of digital content from that as well, so that it can be used to, they can use the videos and the photographs from that live event to, you know, essentially extend that whole experience and put it into the two-dimensional space, which is a lot of what we're experiencing is two-dimensional visual imagery, but we're not really leaking it out into the three-dimensional environment, and it's very predictable out there. You know, a lot of people who are in charge of three-dimensional spaces are developers, builders, and event managers that, you know, they're not designers. I'm not saying that there isn't designers working in that space, because obviously there's architects and interior designers, and there's also really incredible production designers that work in events. But a lot of people in charge of these decision making and dealing with space are actually not really trained in visual, how to create visual pictures and experiences.
Great. And so if someone wanted to get your support for an event, what's the starting point?
So yeah, the starting point really is, I mean, if you're a location and a celebration, an intention, and then there'd be a sort of 3-phase process, which you could just do phase 1, which is design planning, which you could be then hand over to somebody else to execute that. Or what I've done more of is the whole project, which is design, production, and project manage into execution and, you know, delivery essentially. So that could be, you know, an event, or it could be something a bit more ongoing, like a developer wanting to do ongoing activations in spaces. Yeah.
Excellent. And so so someone might come to you and say, hey, I want the most amazing 50th birthday party in my backyard.
In my backyard, because I've been really trying to adapt to COVID, and I really love like big commercial projects, or, you know, lovely commercial projects, but I don't want it to be exclusive. I think about space. I think about what people have, and I like things to be accessible and resourceful. So I've been trying to adapt what I do so that people can access using their home spaces, which they've all upgraded through COVID. That's what everyone did while they were in lockdown, did their yards. So if they had a 50th birthday celebration, I would come in and look at the space that they have, possibly hire or use the beautiful things that they have, do some decorations, create the ambience, think about their guest experience essentially, and execute it, do anything specialist. So it's essentially about detail, and there is obviously a formula to events, but I really like the idea of personality and surprise and fun, because I think you can follow these formulas and but they're just a bit too familiar. So how do you make it exciting? Like what's that point of difference that you make? And it's about thought and planning and detail.
Yeah, beautiful. And so you talked about personality, surprise, and fun. And I love that, because sometimes we think it has to be so over the top and grandiose, but sometimes subtle things can make a huge difference. What can you give examples of what sort of things that you've done in the past that would make it give that element of a surprise or make it fun?
Are you talking about like a home event?
Or any event that you've done, so that you can say, actually, what I did was I did this, and that was the result that I was intending with that, and I put this in there. Or, give us some examples, some concrete example of the sort of things that you can do for people.
Okay, so you put me on the spot. I really, okay. So I guess I'll just go to the best example I've got of what I've designed for a surprise element that is also beautiful yet familiar. And that is my movable feast concept, which is a product for events. And it is a table that is a trolley, and it has a skirt, so you cannot see the trolley, but there's a performer in the middle of that trolley, and it is designed for, a meet and greet at an event. So it could be a small private party, which we've done many of, or a sort of special event for a business or a brand. So we've done Chanel and Jimmy Choo and all different kinds of amazing events. But it stands at the entrance. It has the beverage service on the table, and it's based on classical. Well, it's based on like a Parisian sort of style of hospitality, where you get greeted by a hostess or a maitre d', and there's a formalization. You're greeted. It's beautiful because it's decorative, because the woman's in an amazing costume that is a skirt table. And so you get handed your glass of champagne or your special cocktail or whatever it is. And so then they go into the event. So that's a beautiful greeting, and that's a very important thing when you enter an event. Any event or any space is like, what's that experience as you enter? What's the formalization of it, so that that when you're arriving, it's not, there's thought put into that. And then obviously, because this table is a trolley, once everyone's arrived, and it's great for a cocktail thing, they start to move, and they start to move around the event. And so that's a huge surprise for people, because they saw them as a stationary thing, and then they're suddenly rolling, like gliding around their event and doing the service. So that was good. That's good for top up. I don't know, that's probably a good example of surprise and detail.
Yeah, and I love it, and it's because it's not even what it is itself, but it's the execution of it.
Yeah, it's the design, decorative.
Yeah, and so it's the fact that it's not moving in the start to that movement. It's like almost like there's a bit of a build up to it as well.
Yeah, and so and again, I guess in a way, I don't. When you say this asked about solid examples of how you do that, I mean, I guess that changes how every event. That can be done through entertainment. It can be done through because ultimately, I'm not being very concise here, but ultimately, you don't want to for people to feel shocked or confronted at an event. It's all about ease. So you sort of need to have people feel familiar and understand the formality, but then just, jazz it up a bit. And you might do that through just beautiful decorations and the formality. Like events are essentially a lot around feeling special. And so what is that hospitality experience? What kind of effort has the person or the people who put on the event gone to? And it can be very simple and elegant. It doesn't have to be over the top, but it just has to be thoughtful.
Yeah. And I love what's really hit home for me is the importance of that experience when you enter.
Yeah.
Like we even had very small event, well, not, 30 to 40 people at our office.
Yeah.
And when we had an office a few years ago, and someone actually wrote in the feedback that he was really disappointed with the experience as he entered was really what it was.
Right. But it was too flat.
He felt like he didn't know where to go, where to look, what to do. So it's really, what you've said is really hit home for me, that a lot of thought needs to go into those sorts of things.
Yeah. And an experience pays off as well. People can sit down and plan an event, but if you don't have, if you haven't seen a lot of events and you've been involved, you don't sort of know what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing that really is coming into my head around all of this is that it's almost like it feels like you go to an event, you don't know all the detail, you just know how you feel.
Yeah, and you shouldn't see the detail. It should be fairly seamless, and it looks simple, and that's the beauty of events. The sort of ones that are sort of most complicated, that feel just flow and simple, there's been a lot of planning and execution involved in making that just seamless and beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in a way, like I know how to make things, so I might be a designer, but ultimately I do know about production design. So, and I've made a lot of things in my life I've done installations. So people have great concepts for events, and this is probably the trick, is that it looks really easy, but it's not. It's not easy to do beautiful decorations. It's not easy to do a big tower of champagne glasses. It's not easy to organize someone to jump out of a birthday cake, even though they're kind of classic ideas and they've been done and done and done, and they are great. It's actually, there's a lot of detail in that.
Yeah. And so we've talked a little bit about, with COVID, people using outdoor spaces more. What are the tips to using outdoor spaces if you want to create an experience for people?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll basically give some good event tips. You can apply them to your backyard. You could apply them to public space, urban environments. So first, you want to choose your location. It's a really, really important key, because you can plan what you want to do, but if it's not going to work for the space, it's kind of a waste of time. So when you choose your location, probably look for a couple of good features about it. The practicalities are important, and traffic flowing and blocking. So just try and read your space. And I guess obviously you will have thought about what you want to do. Like, is it a sit down long dinner? Is it a cocktail party? What kind of food you might like. So then once you've got your location, you probably want to think about your ambience. So your lighting, music, they're both very important. I mean, if it's a daytime event, obviously you don't need lighting, but definitely some kind of atmosphere is important, and I do think that people often leave that out, and it can kind of feel empty, especially in sort of like a corporate lunch or something like that. It can be a little bit, oh, this is just really predictable and dry, and we're going to eat our sandwiches and go back to the talk or whatever it is. Then decorative. So that can be anything from a feature, like an entry, to a table dressing, florals, or more. You can, if it was a special celebration, you might want to think about more. What are they? Make sure that you keep it simple and elegant rather than over the top. If it's too complicated to go over the top, just go back to something really elegant and simple. And then I guess the catering is ultimately a big part of having a successful event. What is that? It is important. How is it delivered? It should be good quality. Yeah, make an effort there. The drinks and food are important, I think, and how they're delivered, how they're displayed. If there's no waiters, I mean, obviously with COVID, all those sort of catering things have changed a lot, and there's a lot of restrictions on them. So how can you do it elegantly, but the food be really nicely packaged if they're individual things? Yeah, there's some tips.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think I really took another point there about the how things are delivered and presented, especially around food. And just at Christmas this year, there was heaps and heaps of chicken left over, and I was thinking later, it was just the way it was presented. The pieces were too big. People didn't take them because of the presentation of the chicken. It was just really, really fascinating. And then we had another a smaller family event recently, and it was presented differently, and then people ate it all. So it was, it really does make a difference.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm a big fan of banquet style. I like, especially with like a pre-event or a cocktail event where you have all the food out and have people have little tables, so you can really make a beautiful feature of a table with food just packed on it with lots of different, deli stuff, and I love that. But yeah, COVID's. I'm trying to get my head around how that I can still create that look, and it not, because you have to have individual service now if you're going to do something like that. You can't allow people to do that.
Yeah. And so in terms of overall tips, if around experience and events. You've mentioned some really good things there about, the entry to the event, the food, the lighting, and all those things. Is there a big difference between inside and outside, or
huge differences? I mean, a lot of events inside. Usually the venues are like, it's very rare to have it, to be given a venue that hasn't been used for events. So they already have a lot in place that's standard for an event. So they'll have a sound system. They'll have, this is where the catering comes from, blah 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 blah. So there's a lot of execution detail already resolved for you. So outdoor spaces are a whole different, everything has to be brought in. And the locations of those things are really important for the experience of the guest, because ultimately you're wanting your guest to enjoy the features of where they are, not the practicals of the event. So they don't want to be seeing, they don't want to like hang out near a tent with a refrigerator beside it. So yeah, and also how do you rig stuff? Like if you want to float decorations and festooning, there's a lot of infrastructure that goes with that. So I personally really like the idea of resourceful, simple outdoor events, but you bring in some features to make them beautiful. But they're really rewarding because they're unusual spaces to have, to experience. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, you've given us lots of great tips around, creating amazing experience and events. And some people like to take your tips and take them on board and do them themselves. But a lot of people, there might be people in local government or, corporate or small business or even the private sector. Individuals who would rather you come and do something for them and consult with them to create a beautiful experience. So what's the best way for them to contact you?
Well, I have a website. It's amygale.studio. So no .com, no .com.au, just .studio, amygale.studio. My Instagram handle is amygalestudio and my Facebook is the same. So my contact is there. You can send me a date, a location. I've got small teams in Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, for different things, for different products, or I can design and hand over. So yeah, that's how you get in contact. Or
awesome.
You can email me.
Beautiful. So there's the details there on the screen. Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing your creativity, your experience and your wisdom with us today.
Thank you, Maureen.
So there you have it. If you want to contact Amy, feel free to do so. I'm sure she'll be able to give you some great ideas and help you create an experience of a lifetime for your guests. Okay, bye for now. See you next time. So if you'd like to see more interviews with amazing business owners sharing extraordinary insights, click subscribe, then click the bell button, then click all, and we'll notify you.